Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Green Flag. I'm your host, Lukas Wacker, and welcome to the first NASCAR edition of Wacker's Race Review. We're switching it up over here on the channel for these race reviews. I'm going to be doing these solo for the majority of the season, if not all of it, and then Kyle will be joining us for the regular scheduled preview episodes later on in the week. So you can expect him back. He's not going anywhere, folks. He's going to be here on the channel, but we're just going to scale it back a little bit on his end, and I'm going to take over for the race reviews here for NASCAR, IndyCar, and Formula One as much as I can throughout the summer months. So we've got the NASCAR race weekend to recap here for Talladega Superspeedway. It was a pretty entertaining weekend, I would say, overall. The Cup Series was obviously here and the Xfinity Series race, but we're primarily going to be talking about the Cup Series race in today's episode. So without further ado, let's get right into it. And we'll start off with the finish of this one. And that saw Mr. Brad Keselowski in victory lane for the first time this season, the 9th different winner through the first 10 races of this season. With the victory, he ties Jeff Gordon and Dale Earnhardt Jr. with 6 wins here at Talladega, and that is tied for second all-time, of course, behind the all-time great, the Intimidator, Mr. Dale Earnhardt himself. So just a huge win for Brad Keselowski. Hadn't won at this track for quite some time, I believe since 2016, I want to say 2017 potentially, somewhere around there for the 2-car, but just a really great showing for him. Really needed that. Had the poor result there at Richmond after the poor strategy call there at the end of stage 2, which put him a lap down. Probably had a top 5 car at that track, but today at Talladega, he recovered, and he only led 1 lap, but he definitely saved that lap led for the most important one. An incredible showing there for the 2 team. And it was just an up and down day for Team Penske. We'll talk about Joey Logano and that incident a little bit later on, but let's look at the finish of this one in a little bit more of an in-depth fashion here. And it starts off with a green-white checkered finish, NASCAR overtime, if you want to call it that as well. Martin Truex Jr. brings out the caution prior to that in the closing laps of the actual the scheduled distance here at Talladega for a tire carcass that he had a flat tire going down. He was up there at the top 5 like a couple of laps before. I don't know what happened, if he got some contact or whatnot, but he had a flat tire, and he kind of just rode around the track. He didn't come down pit road hoping for a caution kind of thing where he could stay on the lead lap, but that never came to avail, as he was actually the result of the caution. It was unfortunate there for the 19 car, who actually kind of positioned himself in a decent spot throughout the day, was involved in an earlier incident with his teammate Denny Hamlin, which we'll talk about as well in this episode. But Truex brings out the caution there for a tire carcass sitting there near the start-finish line. NASCAR has no choice but to throw the caution. And at that point in time, Matt DiBenedetto was in line for his first career Cup Series victory, and the caution would come out. He would be the leader for the restart as well. Had a lot of Fords up there at the front of the top 6 at that point in time. And it was kind of DiBenedetto's race to lose. And of course, that first lap, it is a little bit hard to gain that momentum and just try and build enough energy to get past the leader. And then that final lap is where usually stuff really starts to kick off. But for DiBenedetto, he led to the white flag pretty straightforward, had his 4 teammates behind him, and then it started to fan out as Ryan Blaney seemed to have a pretty decent run coming on the outside. DiBenedetto was initially on the inside line at the white flag. After the start-finish line, he moves up to try and block Ryan Blaney. And then, unfortunately for DiBenedetto, the inside line had just enough momentum to edge its way past DiBenedetto before he could try and go back down in front of Keselowski, who was leading that line at the time. Keselowski would lead all the way around and hold off all challengers, and it was very close. Coming through the tri-oval, William Byron was giving Mike McDowell a big shove, and McDowell popped to the outside of Keselowski, hoping to get a little bit of side draft on the right rear of the 2 car to try and slow him down just a little bit, but it didn't quite work out for the 34 car, of course, going for back-to-back super speedway victories after that incredible Daytona 500 victory earlier on this season, in the season opener that was. And Byron just didn't quite get enough energy built there for McDowell to slow down the 2 car and gain enough momentum to get past him there before the start-finish line. So he ends up finishing 3rd at McDowell. William Byron comes home 2nd, and Keselowski does not have to worry about a photo finish in this instance. And he brings home the checkered flag there. He goes sweeps the weekend, or sweeps the week, if you want to call it that, for NASCAR Cup Series action at Talladega. Of course, won the iRacing Pro Invitational race earlier on this week on Wednesday night, and then follows that up to win it in real life here. So I guess maybe there is a little bit of correlation between the two. We saw William Byron do well in iRacing here. Of course, at Homestead, didn't win the race last season when they did the Pro Invitational, when NASCAR was obviously off due to the pandemic, but won earlier this year at Homestead in real life. So there's just a bit of correlation that we haven't seen it to the full extent as maybe what we would have maybe expected or would maybe like, but it is good to see that iRacing has a platform there that can respond and translate into real life success there. So Keselowski takes home the victory here. Huge victory for the entire two team. And like I said, 9th different winner in 10 races. That's an incredible total. And I mean, we have some big names that have not won a race yet so far. The regular season points leader right now, Denny Hamlin, does not have a victory, even though he is about 80 plus points ahead of his nearest challenger there. I believe it is still Martin Truex Jr. I could be wrong on that. Chase Elliott, your defending champion, does not have a race win yet. Kevin Harvick, the guy who had the most wins last season, does not have a victory yet. And of course, 2 seasons ago now, the 2019 champion Kyle Busch does not have a victory as of yet as well. So there's some big names still looking for a victory here. And, you know, if it's going to happen any season, maybe this is the year we see 16 different winners. It's going to be tough. There's going to need to be some upsets here and there throughout the rest of the season, but you never know what can happen, as Fox is claiming this to be the best season ever. It's doing a pretty good job to live up to that kind of slogan so far. But yeah, Keselowski just kind of put his car in the right place at the right time, and that's all you can really ask for. And he gets the trophy at the end of the day. But that may not be the biggest storyline that comes out of Dega after today's race. It's most likely going to be about the incident at the end of stage 1 that saw his Penske teammate Joey Logano go airborne, flip, and land on his roof, sliding to a halt. A very scary looking incident. As much as we'd like to slack on Joey Logano on this show, his safety and the driver's safety is obviously the utmost importance, and we don't want to see anything bad happen to anybody out there on the racetrack. And that, and of course, Joey Logano is included in that. It was just a very scary incident. He was a guy in my fantasy lineup this week. I don't know how, but I wish Kyle could be on this episode, really, because I finally won a NASCAR fantasy weekend against Kyle on the super speedway tracks. It's been a hard going throughout the past year and a half of this show's history. I've not yet beaten him on a super speedway until today, and it felt really good despite having an absolutely horrendous time with my lineup today. I don't know how I won, but I ended up pulling it out with some bonus picks going my way. So that felt good. But back to Joey Logano. He was in the top 5 at the time of the incident. And let's just take a step back here. I don't think I could put a blame on anybody for an incident like this. You know, there is some times where you probably could put a blame on somebody, but with this package right now, the runs come so fast, the energy is built up so quickly that it is very difficult to try and stop that momentum between the car and give that buffer and give that little bit of space, that give and take that we usually see during the single file time. At the end of these stages, they take a lot, and there's rarely anything to give at the end of these things. So yeah, for Joey Logano, he was very candid after the wreck in his care center interview, and you know, he said that the big spoiler is causing big crashes, and he was pretty candid. Like I said, he's had some pretty vocal some statements that he made, and he said he was one hit away from being Ryan Newman, which of course is referring to the 2020 Daytona 500 incident there with Newman at Daytona, where obviously we all know the rest of that storyline. We don't need to talk about that. But for Joey Logano, he was very lucky to get away with this one. And we usually see in a turn 3 at Talladega quite a few incidents. And when there is an incident with one car, it usually translates into an accordion effect with 10 or maybe 15 others. But on this instance, that wasn't to be the case. It was just kind of a couple of cars, the people that started it a little bit, It was just a push gone wrong. Essentially, it was just the energy that was built up behind Joey Logano there. It started with Ricky Stenhouse into Denny Hamlin, who then got into the back of the 22 car, unfortunately, and sent him into the outside wall before having so much air. It got underneath the car, and then it ended up flipping him over. We've seen similar crashes many years ago. The most similar one I can recall, I could be wrong on this, let me know if you remember any others, but the 2016 crash there with Matt Kenseth at Talladega on the back straightaway, where Danica Patrick got into him. Kenseth was just on the inside line, ended up airborne, flying into the inside wall there. Was luckily nobody was hurt. Kenseth was able to walk away, thank goodness. And then we remember back to the COT days, that was kind of a regular occurrence. Ryan Newman there flipping over at Talladega, as well as Brad Keselowski, the race winner at Atlanta Motor Speedway there with the incident with Carl Edwards when that rivalry was just kind of getting underway, I guess you could call it. So actually, that was back in 2010, excuse me. The COT car was actually for the first couple of races in 2010. My bad. My apologies on that one. But yeah, for Joey Logano, it does bring the question up because we have seen these super speedway races be so good the past 2.5, 3 years around that. And it's in large part due to this aero package. The runs, the leader is no longer at all safe. They can't block both lanes as much as they used to because the runs come too quickly and it's just too much to absorb in the back bumper of these things. And it begs the question, does NASCAR need to look at changing this super speedway package? It is going to be the topic of discussion after this because we saw a flip like this, and you know that the driver's safety is the utmost importance, of course. And Joey Logano did obviously say in his TV interview that he's very lucky and he's very thankful to be driving a car that is as safe as what it is. But you know, how long do we kind of race like this until something bad again does happen, like similar to what Ryan Newman had in 2020? It is very scary to think that it was marginally close for Newman, and that could have been the same case for Joey Logano if one thing goes one way or the other. Bubba Wallace barely skates by that incident as well. It was pretty crazy to see the onboard shot there with the obviously the helmet cam on Bubba Wallace for this race, and they picked definitely a good time to put that camera on him as it just grazed the hood / roof area of the 23 car. So thankfully for Bubba Wallace, he would come away unscathed for the most part there. And for Joey Logano, obviously that was not the case. So his day ends early. He would finish 40th. But I want to ask you guys, let us know in the comments, do you think that NASCAR should look at changing this super speedway package just for the safety and bring down the speeds or whatever they need to do to try and minimize the risk or minimize the potential for something like this to happen again? It's just, it is obviously scary, but at the same time, does NASCAR really feel like they're in a position here where the ratings are a little bit down and they can sacrifice these super speedway tracks that bring in a lot of viewership, the Daytonas and Talladegas, because of how entertaining they have been and the spectacle that they are? Can they really afford to maybe take away some of this intrigue factor that they put into these highlight reels and these highlight packages that they promo for races, trying to promote the sport? And it is an interesting debate now, because we have seen this now 2 times in the past year. So for myself, I would probably look at maybe decreasing the speeds just a little bit here. It is such a stressful race as a fan. If you're a fan of a specific driver, I find it extremely stressful, probably the most stressful races of the entire season, apart from being in maybe a championship fight. I just get so on edge with these things because of the danger that these tracks do present. And just the nervousness of having a wrecker on any corner, going into any corner, anywhere on the track. You're never safe at Talladega, no matter where you are in the pack or Daytona. It's just, I would probably look at just bringing down the speeds just a little bit. The big spoiler is not the most attractive thing to look at in terms of looking at a race car. So I don't know if there's anything that they could do there, but at the same time, when there isn't an incident like this, it's just really good racing at the end of the day. We had single file spurts here and there, but most of the time it was 2-3 wide racing throughout this event. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is for your NASCAR. It's a very difficult situation that they put themselves in, or they found themselves in. And when you have a guy that is as aggressive as Joey Logano is on these super speedway tracks, to hear him talk about that in that kind of a tone, in that kind of a way on a national audience here to Fox and to millions of people watching the race, it's going to get a lot of traction, and it's going to get a lot of attention. Maybe it's negative attention, maybe it's positive attention, trying to push towards something that Logano wants or push against something Logano wants. It's going to take a little bit more, I think, probably from the drivers to be a bit more outspoken, to hear what they have to say about it instead of just one singular source. I think a couple of guys, the Ford camp, Harvick and Keselowski, after the race, they were concerned obviously with the speeds and the flip itself from Logano. So I think there's going to be maybe some discussions behind closed doors with NASCAR, maybe some of the drivers to hear their concerns. And we'll see if anything happens for the regular season finale at Daytona come late August, when the season does start to wrap up the regular season, that is, of course. And that's the next time we have one of these plate tracks, or not plate tracks. I guess it is just a super speedway race now that they don't have the restrictor plates in these things. So we'll see what NASCAR does on that one, but that was definitely the biggest storyline out of this one. And thankfully, Joey Logano and everybody else involved was okay. Stenhouse and Hamlin pulled off a miraculous save. I don't know how he saved it, but once again, as we talked about in the preview show, the guys that usually start the wrecks are not really involved that much, or they're able to escape somehow. They don't get the most damage out of these wrecks, and that's just the case of the product of this kind of racing, that you're going to have people that get through that cause these wrecks, and it's unfortunate when that happens if your favorite driver's involved or whatnot. But for Stenhouse, he got a bit of damage. Bubba Wallace suffered a little bit of damage, so that was 3 guys in my fantasy lineup that did suffer some damage quite early on. And of course, Hamlin, my race winner pick and my top Toyota finisher. It seemed like it was off the rails there for NASCAR fantasy, but somehow I was able to scratch and claw my way back to getting a win. Then before all of this happened, really, it was before the race really even got underway, we saw the Toyotas go to the back for unapproved adjustments for an approved adjustment to the A post. And then just less than a couple of laps into this one, maybe on lap 2, I think it was, Kyle Larson's car went into overheating mode and ended up blowing up soon thereafter. Went down pit road to check it out. I think there was a piece of metal stuck in the front that they forgot to remove on transportation here. And that is just proof of why we need practice and qualifying back at the track. It's stuff like that where you take out a guy that could definitely be in contention or help out an organization like Hendrick Motorsports to a victory, and they get taken out before the race really even begins because of not having these systems checks and just having the protocols that we really go under with practice, and just making sure everything's set up the way that they want to. And it's just unfortunate for Kyle Larson there. Has had a great season up to this point in time, has faltered a little bit the last 2 weeks, had a poor run at Richmond, had a poor run at Talladega. We'll see if he can go back to his very consistent top 5 ways here at Kansas this upcoming weekend at a track that he's done very, very well at in his NASCAR career. But yeah, that was Larson's day done and dusted. And it was just unfortunate for the entire 5 team there. Just circumstances not going their way, luck not going their way. And it's just that's just a team error, I guess. I could put it down to that. But we'll see if Larson can bounce back at Kansas next weekend. Then the other biggest wreck, I guess you want to quantify that, we didn't really have the big one in this race where we see 15 plus cars involved. We had a scary incident with Logano, of course. And then this one here at another late stage caution here at the end of stage 2. Saw Martin Truex Jr. and his teammate Denny Hamlin come together on the front straightaway, where it was just a push gone wrong. Hamlin gets turned into the outside line, and that collected the 3 remaining Hendrick cars in the race there, with Alex Bowman, William Byron, and of course Chase Elliott. So Byron did recover. Obviously, we talked about him finishing second in the race, but for Alex Bowman, he would go under the damaged vehicle policy, or the damaged vehicle clock, or whatever you want to call it. And he would have his 6 minutes expire. I still hate that rule. I just can't get behind that rule with the time limit itself. Sure, the crash clock, not the crash clock, but just repairing the car itself, of course. But I think if you should go to the garage and you repair it correctly, I think there's definitely an opportunity for him to go maybe get some extra positions there. But then again, he has a race win, so he doesn't need to worry about points all that much for the remainder of the season. Just need to go out there and get some race victories there, does Alex Bowman. So yeah, just a lot of heavy hitters, a lot of big names that we usually see on the traditional tracks here did get involved in that incident there. So unfortunate for them. And then it was just a fairly tame stage 3 after that. Lots of single file, guys planning moves, green flag pit stops went pretty much to plan. There's a lot of speeding penalties in this one, namely Denny Hamlin. We'll look at him and the notable finishers of this one. But yeah, just a pretty straightforward Talladega race compared to what we have seen in the past. We saw obviously some good racing here and there, good pushing. It didn't seem like there was too many bad blocks in this one. Matt Benedetto did do one on Kyle Busch coming out of turn 4. Props to the 18 driver there for saving that race car. I don't know how he did it, but he did it, going for the lead there. And Benedetto pulled off a late block, a clumsy block, I would say, when you've got a couple of Toyotas behind Busch that would definitely follow him through. But when you're a guy that's, in a desperate spot like Benedetto is after having a poor start to this season, I guess those risks are worth taking at the end of the day. So yeah, that's basically all in the race recap itself. Again, let us know about the Joey Logano incident. What would you guys do if you are NASCAR? Do you look at decreasing the horsepower? What do you think would be the best solution here for NASCAR in the short-term future here? Because of course, this package kind of goes wayside for the next gen car. We're gonna have to see how that all carries over for next season. But for the remaining 2 races of the season, 2 very pivotal races in the NASCAR season with Talladega in the playoffs and Daytona as the regular season finale, they could have massive implications on the remainder of the season on who makes the playoffs, who advances, kind of thing. Does NASCAR need to look at this kind of package here and make any adjustments? We've seen it in the past where they've kind of made the spoiler bigger to try and decrease the speeds. We're well over 200 miles per hour in the pack now. And does NASCAR want to try and get it under 200 miles per hour now, like it kind of was in the mid 2010s here with the older package? So that does it really for the race recap itself. But let's look at the notable finishers and dive into the race a little bit more on an in-depth scale here itself for some of the finishers. We've talked about some of the guys already, of course, with Brad Keselowski, William Byron, Michael McDowell. What an impressive run for him. Scored a lot of points in this event for himself. So props to him on getting another solid run for this season, finishing, I guess that's an average finish of 1.5 on these kinds of tracks this season. So I think you got to feel really great if you are Michael McDowell right now, of course, clinched into the playoffs as it stands. So impressive showing for him. That's your top 3. Kevin Harvick there in 4th, had a penalty at one point in time in the race. I believe it was for speeding, but recovers to get a 4th place finish, another top 5 for his season. And that's exactly the kind of day that Kevin Harvick needed. He's done well in these super speedway tracks in the past. Has had a bit of dip in performance, I would say, over the past couple of seasons. I remember him more at his RCR days than of his Stewart Haas days currently on these kinds of tracks. But Harvick definitely has some skills here on these kinds of super speedways, and just needed that for his confidence and momentum building into Kansas, a track that he has done exceptionally well at when he's moved over to the number 4 team here since 2014. So watch out for the 4 car potentially this weekend if they can get their groove going a little bit, their mojo back, if you want to call it that as well. That'll be good for that entire team, and to get their season a little bit more on track or more on par of what we expect from him. Matt Benedetto recovers and falls back to 5th at this one. Another one slips by the wayside for him, unfortunately. Just a tough going for that 21 team. It seemed like he was, en route for maybe a victory, Wood Brothers 100th victory in the Cup Series. That's going to have to wait another weekend here, and that was one of his better shots to win this season. And he's going to need probably a win to make the playoffs, in all honesty, with the way things have gone so far. So we'll talk about Matt Benedetto here a little bit later on. But for him, 5th place run. And shout out to Kaz Gralla here in 6th place. I texted Kyle during the race, and I said, I didn't even know Kaz Gralla was in this race, because he looked like he was getting passed by the leaders at one point in time, and he ends up 6th there for Colleague Racing. Of course, he ran the Daytona 500 for them, made it in through the duels, and he finishes 6th here at Talladega. So good for Kaz Gralla, just way to make a name for himself really right now. And he's obviously looking for a full-time ride in any series really. And for him to do that on a Cup Series caliber of a race here at Talladega, that's going to bode well for him in the future for Kaz Grala. So impressive from him. Then it's the RCR duo behind him in Tyler Reddick edging out his teammate Austin Dillon at the finish, 7th and 8th respectively for them. We expected that kind of coming into this race. They would have been really good for your fantasy lineup. I wish I kind of put them in there, but nonetheless, they did exceptionally well the entire day, kept their nose clean, stayed out of incidents. They didn't really get talked about too much on the broadcast, but I think when you come home with 2 drivers in the top 10 at Talladega as a track as unpredictable as this, I think you'll feel pretty good about yourself if you're RCR. And they've looked pretty decent to start the season, specifically Austin Dillon, who's still in a playoff spot as of right now on points. So we move on to 9th place here. Ryan Blaney was almost in the lead there at the white flag there, and it just fell back because of moving and shuffling on that final lap. Obviously, the defending race winner of this event last season just gets a top 10 run, and we expect that from Ryan Blaney on these kinds of tracks. He's done really, really well at Talladega specifically, so good run for him. And then to round out the top 10, Cole Custer really, really needed that for his season. I've been, we've been a little bit critical of Cole Custer on this show for his performances so far for Stewart-Haas Racing. I mean, he's down all the way in 23rd in points right now, so not off to a great start, but at least he gets a top 10 run at the end of the day, his first top 10 of the season as well. So hopefully this can do him well. Moves to 1.5 miles where he actually did pretty well at last season as well with Kansas. So we'll see if Cole Custer can continue that momentum similar to his teammate there in Kevin Harvick. Just needs to get that mojo back and get just string of consistent results together. And we'll see Cole Custer hopefully inside the top 15 more consistently. And then back to 12th. Anthony Alfredo was involved in an incident there with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and Quinn Houff coming to pit road. He, gave push to Quinn Houff. I don't know what happened there, if Quinn Houff was trying to pit there for the green flag pit stop or if Anthony Alfredo gave him a wrong push, but nonetheless, he did get into the back of Quinn Houff, and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. was just innocent bystander there. Wrong place, wrong time, hits the inside wall. No caution would come out of it. But for Anthony Alfredo getting 12th, I believe that is his highest Cup Series finish. I'm not 100%. Don't quote me on that. But a top 15 finish, nonetheless, for Anthony Alfredo. And that's obviously great for him. We saw John Hunter Nemechek do well in that car last season on these tracks. Had the best average finish last season in the Cup Series on these super speedways. So good to see that the 38 car is translating speed on these tracks this season. Next, we have Ryan Newman in 13th. Had 2 speeding penalties, similar to Denny Hamlin, which we'll talk about in a second here. Had 2 speeding penalties back-to-back here, trying to serve the penalty. And then when he was serving the penalty, he sped on that. So the fact that he was able to get a free pass and recover to get a top 15 finish, decent day for Ryan Newman, but we expected a little bit more for him to be up at the front, maybe at the end of the final lap there, where he usually is on these super speedway tracks, but a top 15 for Newman. And then behind him in 14th place here, Ryan Preece, a guy that has done very, very well on these super speedway tracks, fell back a little bit there on the last couple of runs or the last couple of laps there, but 14th place, they should feel good about that. They're still in that playoff contention there for a position, still at 21st in points. So we'll see what happens with that team. His teammate Stenhouse is still doing decently there inside the playoffs currently. So we'll see if Preece can continue his decent form throughout the season after a solid run such as this one. And then we move back to 19th. Bubba Wallace won his first career stage victory in the Cup Series for 23XI Racing and for himself personally. That'll do well for him, getting 10 valuable points here for their march for a playoff spot. Fell back, had a questionable strategy call with Kyle Busch there on the last caution there for Martin Truex Jr. They pitted. They were the only 2 cars to pit, and they ended up falling back. They're restarting about mid-20s when they were about the mid-teens, and you wonder if they could have maybe gotten to that top 10 at the end of it. But they made a call. Didn't really work out, unfortunately, for them. And, I think you got to chalk that up to Mike Wheeler and Ben Bayshore for making a strategic blunder such as that one there for themselves. Then behind him in 20th place, special shout out to Harrison Burton and the entire Gaunt Brothers 96 team in his Cup Series debut, brings home a top 20 finish at a super speedway track where he hasn't been necessarily the best in his Xfinity Series career, but he hasn't been horrible by any means. But for Harrison Burton to get a top 20 against some of these other guys that he's usually that are Cup veterans, Cup maybe even champions, and he gets a top 20 finish, that's really, really impressive for him and Gaunt Brothers equipment. So shout out to him. Then we move back to 27th place. Eric Jones was in the lead with about 15 laps to go, fell back. He just got shuffled out due to having a lack of friends basically out there, lack of teammates, because he doesn't have any at Richard Petty Motorsports. So, and he got involved in an incident there on the last lap, ends up 27th, but was looking great up until that point. Had him in my fantasy lineup originally, and then something happened with the NASCAR app where he was not in my fantasy lineup. So I ended up wasting a Joey Logano usage, unfortunately, because the person that they had Eric Jones replaced with was Kyle Larson. So I didn't do too great on that front with the luck of things. But for Eric Jones, 27th place, not what he'd obviously want, not what we expect from him on these super speedway tracks, but ran out of luck really at the end of things. But he showed some good glimpses of speed. He could be maybe a potential upset there at Daytona in the regular season finale. Then we move back to 32nd with Denny Hamlin, my guy to win the race. An eventful day for the 11 team. 2 speeding penalties, the exact same thing as what Ryan Newman did, but just a little bit earlier on in the race. He was he was leading the guys to pit road, the Toyotas to pit road for green flag pit stops. Overcooked it and ended up getting a speeding penalty. And then on his approach to serve that penalty, he ended up getting another speeding penalty. So just went from bad to worse. He was a lap down, got involved in the pack, and then when he was battling to try and get back on that lead lap, maybe even trying to race his way back onto that lead lap there at the end of stage 2, trouble bit the 11 car with that spin and that contact with the 19 car, and he never recovered from there, finishing, I think it was maybe 2 laps down for the 11 car, maybe 1 lap down for him. So unfortunate for the 11 after having such an inconsistent streak, still 8 top 5s in the first 10 races of this season. So I wouldn't feel any less about the 11 car after a weekend like this. Just try to overcompensate, I think, a little bit too much for Denny there. And he got to play it safe a little bit at that point in time. And, he's in a position where he doesn't have to maybe play it safe, and he can be a little bit aggressive with the points lead that he's deservedly built up so far this season. And then we move back to a place behind him here in 33rd, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., guy that we expect big things out of on these super speedway tracks. Could not find any worse luck here on Sunday, as he was basically involved in every wreck at some point in time throughout this thing. Got contact when he shouldn't have got contact, was involved in that first incident there with Joey Logano, caught the 22 car and the 11's, I think, rear quarter panel there, maybe, to get that left front damage. So just a whirlwind day for Ricky Stenhouse Jr., and he's going to look to put this one in the rearview mirror and approach Kansas with a better, just hopefully for a better result at the end of the day. And then the final 2 here, disappointing here, the last 2 places in the finishing order. Joey Logano, we've talked about him finishing 39th, and then Kyle Larson, we've talked about him finishing 40th. So some big names back in the 30s in this one, and a big name ends up in victory lane at the end of Talladega's first race of the season. So that's the notable finishers from Sunday's event, the Geico 500 at Talladega Superspeedway. Let's look at this new segment that we're bringing into these race reviews, Wacker's Race Reviews. Driver of the day. We see it in Formula One. We're bringing it over here for the American side of things with IndyCar. If you haven't seen that episode, make sure you go check that one out for the race recap of St. Petersburg, and as well for NASCAR here, the driver of the day. Maybe a little bit of a questionable call with some of the things that he did during the race, but nonetheless, I'm going to give driver of the day here to Matt DiBenedetto. He was in contention throughout the race. He got a stage victory there in stage 1. Valuable stage points for that team. Led the second most laps in this race behind Denny Hamlin with 28 laps led. So he was out front for a little bit of time. He collected his first stage win of the season, like I said, and he garnered the 3rd most points of the race. So overall, a very solid day for Matt DiBenedetto. You can maybe, question my decision here of picking him as driver of the day due to his decision on that final lap of picking the wrong lane. But, it's not the first time that we've seen something like that occur. He pulled off that late block on Kyle Busch as well, but he's just trying to be aggressive at this point in time, and I can't fault Matty D for that. So he earns driver of the day honors, and a shout out to Kaz Gralla. He was right there with me for driver of the day. But for long-term effects here for guys that are in the playoffs or not in the playoffs, but looking to try and get into the playoffs, Matty D's day impressed me the most. We already see Michael McDowell. We saw him win the Daytona 500, so we kind of expect these kind of things from him on these kind of tracks. So just a solid day for Matt DiBenedetto. Gets the top 5. Obviously, he was disappointed in his post-race interview, as he should be. He holds himself to a high standard, and we expect things that he's going to break through eventually here for that 21 team. He's running out of time to try and get that 100th win for Wood Brothers before Austin Cindric takes over that car next season. And we're all rooting for Matt DiBenedetto to hopefully get that victory at some point down the line this season. So he earns driver of the day honors. And then finally for the NASCAR Cup Series here, my overall rating of this race. Super speedway races have been a hit or miss for me in my entire NASCAR watching tenure, if you want to call it that, my NASCAR watching career. I've been kind of all over the place. I did like the tandem stuff. I liked it when they had the 2-car tandems and they got to, shuffle around a little bit. I like the pack racing to an extent. It's very stressful. It gets my heart pumping, as I'm sure it does for a lot of you. And, at the end of the day, it wasn't the greatest Talladega race I've ever seen. I think it was probably below average, near the bottom of what we've seen in the past couple of years with this package. And maybe that NASCAR takes that a little bit into account. Maybe 2 more of a duds for 2021 after we saw a spectacular 2020 with this package. Of course, the Daytona 500, all the big wrecks on lap 13, basically half the field is junked out of that one. So there's not much competition left at the end of that one, excuse me. And then in this one, I think drivers were a little bit kind of, off put from that Logano flip and just trying to play it a little bit safe at times, and they were aggressive at other times. So overall, I'm going to give this a 7.5 out of 10. The highest ranking I've given a race so far this season at 8.5, and that is for Las Vegas and Homestead races so far. So just a number grade below those. I can't put it quite up there with those races because the mile and a half have actually looked pretty decent so far this season. And this one, it's better than obviously the Daytona 500, which isn't hard to do. I had that, I think, at like a 2 for the Daytona 500, but this one, 7.5. I think it's just a middle of the road average kind of Talladega race at the end of the day. So that's the kind of Talladega race recap for the NASCAR Cup Series. And then to round out today's episode for the NASCAR Cup, for NASCAR in general from this weekend, a special shout out to the Xfinity Series winner, Jeb Burton, getting his first career Xfinity Series victory. What an impressive showing for him. He really needed something like that. And of course, that 10 car did not end up in victory lane last season with Ross Chastain. Jeb Burton takes it home and gets the checkered flag first. And this one led 20 laps in the event itself, got cut short due to rain with 23 laps to go. Jeb Burton was just in the right place at the right time. I semi-picked him to win the race in the previous episode. If you want to go check that out to make sure I'm not lying, make sure you do. I initially picked Jeb Burton, but then I switched to Brett Moffitt because of the conversation that Kyle and I had in the previous episode with him, and I going back and forth on Moffitt's decision to run for Xfinity Series points and switching from the trucks to that. So Jeb Burton, impressive showing for him, clinches a playoff spot as well in this one. So just an overall fantastic weekend of racing at Talladega Superspeedway. Congratulations to both winners there in Jeb Burton and Brad Keselowski. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at The Green Flag Pod, as well as Twitter at The Green Flag Pod. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it. We would really appreciate it. Thank you so much for all of your support over the past couple of weeks. We really, really appreciate it. All the links to our social channels will be in the description of the YouTube video. But for this episode, I've been Lukas Wacker, and Kyle and I will talk to you a little bit later on this week to get you previewed for the Kansas weekend